Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Crypto Hipster Podcast. This is your host, Jamil Hassan, the Crypto Hipster, where I bring you founders, entrepreneurs, thought leaders, executives, you name it, in the world of blockchain and crypto from around the globe. And today I have an amazing guest, and I'm going to try to pronounce her name correctly. Her first name's Elena. Her last name's Nadalinsky. She is the CEO of Iron Fish Foundation. Elena, welcome.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and you got it. Good pronunciation.
Awesome. So let's kick things off. And I'll ask you the first question is what is your background, and is it a logical background for what you're doing now?
Yeah. So I graduated with computer science, and I went to Microsoft. I knew I always wanted to start a company one day, and I know Microsoft isn't the most obvious choice to go to a company to gain startup experience. But I did join a team within Microsoft that was the incubator team within the office org. And so it actually attracted, really talented minds from all around Microsoft. And I really enjoyed my time there. I learned the hard way that incubators within large corporations like Microsoft don't work. My team was reorged 4 times in the span of a year and a half. Projects were killed. And so morale was very low. And I left Microsoft to join a startup in San Francisco called Tilt. And Tilt was actually a payments startup here in San Francisco. The reason why I joined is I knew a lot of the engineers who were at Tilt from my previous internships at a company called Rackspace, and really enjoyed my time there as well. But Tilt was acquired roughly 7 months after I joined. So I got to see kind of the lifespan of a startup flash before my eyes, so to speak. And so we were acquired by Airbnb. I was at Airbnb for a year and a half, and that's when I kind of went down the crypto rabbit hole. And crypto is kind of like a brain virus. Like once you discover it, once you go to meetups, talk to people, read, white papers or follow some people on Twitter, you kind of just can't stop. It kind of snowballs. And so I quit my job from Airbnb and decided to dedicate my time my full time to crypto. And the way I kind of thought about crypto was backwards of like, what's the biggest thing that I could potentially work on? And to me, that answer was obviously privacy. And that's kind of how I got to that. So, to your original question, like, is my background uniquely positioned for me to start a privacy, cryptocurrency company? And my pushback to that is, I don't think anyone in crypto currently was an expert in crypto before they got to crypto. Like it's one of those very niche fields that you have to just get your hands dirty, and that's how you become an expert. All of the engineers at Iron Fish currently, I would say, are world experts at building blockchains, but pretty much none of them were working in crypto full time. Most of them were just kind of like crypto curious, so to speak. And they got to that status by really digging into the technology, like really learning from past experiences, and using principles first thinking to get to a solution. So I don't know if that answered your question or not, but hopefully that gave you a bit more color.
It does. Actually, my first experience with Microsoft in the crypto space was 2017 when I attended a conference that was put on jointly by Microsoft and Consensus for Blockchain for Social Impact, and it seemed to me like a lot of bright minds were there. So that's in it. And I know people who have left as entrepreneurs and gone to Microsoft. So it's I think a good experience. That's from what I experience with people. But what are your thoughts on what lessons have you taken from Microsoft to apply to your current company, Iron Fish?
Oh gosh, I haven't thought of it that way, but I mean, I will say that I'm a huge admirer of Microsoft. Like I remember when I was joining, like I think large corporations go through this phase of becoming too big to a point where they become stale and like unsexy. And as a new grad, like especially when you're coming out of college, you're kind of in competition with the other peers of like, am I going to the best company possible, right? I think Microsoft is starting to fall off that coolness scale a little bit. But I think they really turned it around. Like I was there as an intern when they completely got rid of the QA position, which is like quality engineer. they had like a tester position, and they just kept revamping and making new products. And I think yeah, huge admirer of the company. In terms of what the lessons I took from Microsoft, I'm not sure that I did. It's part of the reason why I think I left. I think the biggest stronghold of Microsoft is the talent that they have. And so just getting to know people, getting to know how to navigate large corporations, getting to know how to speak to other teams. I think that was probably the biggest lesson from Microsoft in particular. But yeah, the connections you form, I think, are probably the biggest asset.
Sense. So let's get into Ironfish. What is the Ironfish Foundation all about, and how do you differentiate your protocol from other privacy layers in Web3?
Yeah, so Ironfish as the project got started roughly in 2019. And I say this because I quit my job in 2018 from Airbnb. And for roughly a couple of months, I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to be doing in crypto. And in late 2018, we got some funding. It was me and a friend of mine from Facebook. And we kind of started to explore the privacy space in particular because it seemed like the biggest opportunity. And I think it still is today, for what it's worth. So, back then and even now, most teams and talent and really talented people were focusing on things like scalability. So how do you make blockchains process more transactions, or stability, so stable coins. And I think that got evolved to DeFi to some extent. But very few people were working on privacy. And to me, that felt like such a huge gap. It felt like such an obvious choice. How are we going to have a payments platform where everything is just completely out in the open? So yeah, we started on that. And so that was IF Labs. So we had a company, it is now named to IF Labs. And that is the company that was working on the protocol, still is, in terms of developing that vision. Ironfish went through multiple testnet phases. We had probably one of the longer testnet phases running, and we did mainnet launch the protocol on April 20th. So on that date, the company actually split between IF Labs and Ironfish Foundation, which is where I am currently. And the split that we see is the foundation is responsible for ecosystem growth. It's responsible for growing the community, building partnerships, like marketing, getting awareness out. So it's all about how do we decentralize the protocol and how do we get more people involved. And IF Labs is where all the engineers sit. And IF Labs is kind of like the engineering arm of the Ironfish protocol. So your other question was, how does it compare to other privacy chains or privacy projects? So there are a number of privacy projects, and I think there's like a split between the OG privacy protocols like Zcash, Monero, and the new age privacy protocols like us or Alia or Aztec or a couple others. And so the way we differ is we are a layer 1 protocol. We took the strong stance that all transactions are going to be fully private, they're going to be fully encrypted. And we're the only layer 1 privacy chain that has private custom assets. So it's the ability for people to create their own assets. And the reason why we did that is because we want Ironfish to be a privacy platform. We want Ironfish to have assets from other chains. And so the reason why we build private custom assets is so that bridge operators could bridge Ironfish to and from other chains, like Ethereum, for instance, so that users who previously have held Ethereum assets now have access to transfer those assets over to Ironfish and have those assets live in a completely in a fully private layer. So that's how we differ from other layer 1 chains, because we're not building privacy for just ourselves. We're building privacy for the greater crypto ecosystem. And then some of the newer privacy projects, they're kind of building on top of very specific chains. So for instance, there's Manta Network, which is a privacy protocol for, I believe, the Polkadot ecosystem. There's Penumbra, that's building privacy for Cosmos. There's Aztec, they're building privacy for Ethereum. And we're kind of building privacy for, all chains. So we're kind of chain agnostic protocol. So I think out of all of those, we are mainnet launched. We were pretty far along. And so we're kind of being able to prove our thesis a little bit faster, I think. But there's a lot of development happening. Aztec is also a really great company. They're rebuilding their entire protocol right now, so it's pretty exciting to see what they're going to come up with next. But yeah, there's like a lot of innovation in the privacy space in particular, which I'm actually really excited about, because when we started, there were very few teams working on privacy.
Yeah, I only knew of Monero and Zcash. So it's good to learn. And it seems like everywhere in crypto and blockchain is growing, expanding. So that's amazing. So you enable privacy in Web3, right? While maintaining regulatory and legal compliance. Now, I don't know what that is, right? I don't believe there's clear standards, especially from the SEC. So how do you know you're being compliant and meeting those standards when there's no clear, definition out there? How do you do that?
Yeah, so for any crypto company, you do have to worry about like the SEC, and you have to worry about this question of like, if what am I building, is it going to be viewed as a security or not? So this is like not even related to privacy at all. It's more like every single crypto project has to worry about that. So for Ironfish, we are putting in a ton of effort to make sure that the protocol is fully decentralized. We have a foundation. The foundation is actively promoting ecosystem growth. We are a proof of work chain. I think like the way we're building protocols or the way we're building features on top of Ironfish, I think is very cognizant of making sure that it is decentralized. We're making sure that other partners in the space get to build with Ironfish. So we're promoting, bridges being built by other partners, for instance. So I think like on the decentralized front, there's a lot to be said there. We've been open sourced for, I think, 2 years at this point, if not more. We have a ton of contributors outside of the Ironfish ecosystem. We are setting up a governance process that will enable the community to have more of a say on what the protocol does. So I think on the governance front, we're pretty good. Now, on the privacy front, all privacy coin or privacy related projects have to additionally care about AML, BSA, and sanctions, basically. So making sure that you are not enabling bad actors to use your protocol, because decentralized money sounds cool, but private decentralized money can sound a little scary to some people. And so there are different ways for how privacy protocols approach this question of, can we have privacy plus compliance? And to your point, there is no clear guidelines of like, this is what a protocol must do in order for this to be, quote unquote compliant. And when I say compliant, it's, you can't have a protocol be compliant per se. You can only have a regulated entity be compliant. So our job is to make sure that any regulated entity that works with Ironfish can continue to stay compliant while doing so. And so the way we've kind of approached this problem is every Ironfish wallet has a view key, and a view key gives its holder a complete access to all the transactional history for that wallet. So this is very analogous to how like the non-crypto financial banking system works today. I don't get to see your transactions or your balance or anything like that. But if I'm law enforcement and I have probable cause and I get a subpoena or a warrant and I go to your bank has to be compliant with that. And they will give me, your audit history or your bank statement or banking transaction history. So this is very similar to that. If law enforcement goes to a regulated, entity and it says this person is suspicious, they would be able to use this view key to give full transactional history for that individual. In many ways, I think the view key is actually even more powerful because you're not relying on bank having like good record keeping. This is actually like proven on chain to be accurate information. And if you are in like a drug raid and you're law enforcement and you found like the $20 bill, you can't like interrogate that $20 bill. But if you find someone's view key, you would be able to get their entire transactional history. So in some ways, like having this view key is, better than cash, in terms that, cash is actually untraceable. And for Ironfish, every account has that view key. And so a regulated entity could potentially hand over that view key for that individual just to de-anonymize the transactions for the individual given the view key. So I want to be very clear that we do not have a global view key. There is no backdoor to Ironfish. There is no single entity. We don't hold anything like that. But every wallet does come with a view key upon creation.
Good. Yeah, I always like whenever I see members of Congress saying, that blockchains are good for money launderers, I'm like, no, it's probably the worst instrument. It's probably the worst thing, but what you do is you make it easy for people to run nodes, right? And a lot of people say, we make it easy for you to run a node, but then you say run a node, and that's an immediate turn off, and people get scared automatically and immediately, right? How do you make that easy for people so that they shouldn't be turned off by what you do, so they want to use your chain more? How do you make it like simple for them?
Yeah, so we definitely really care about decentralization. And I think one of the definitions for that is how many nodes do you have in the world that are supporting your system? And so that's why we have this pretty heavy emphasis on making sure that we have access or that people can easily run their own nodes. So yes, when we first launched, you were only able to run a full node using the command line interface. As of a couple of weeks ago, we did release the Node app. So now it's a desktop app that anyone can run. You just go to our website, you click on the download button for the Node app, and it should run on pretty much any operating system. And with an app experience, you're given access to a full wallet as well as a full node, and you can run that full node through a desktop app. So we made it as easy as opening up the Zoom link, for instance. So if maybe after this podcast, you can go and try it out.
Great. So you are a proof of, this is rare. I haven't really talked to many people who've been proof of work, right? Your proof of work coin, right? Why should we use proof of work in the crypto sphere? That's been really attacked by these governments and these agencies, SEC specifically, on the proof of stake ecosystems. Why are we more favorable toward proof of work coins, and what's the benefit?
Yeah, so it is very atypical for a new project to start with proof of work. I will acknowledge that. There are several reasons why we did that. One is decentralization. We still think that proof of work is the better approach to reach decentralization. Anyone can mine Ironfish right now. We have thousands and thousands of miners, either solo mining or through mining pools. And if you look at some of the proof of stake projects, it's much harder. Again, full nodes, a lot of proof of stake projects are having a hard time getting validators to kind of be in their network. And for Ironfish, anyone can run a full node. Like I said, you can run a full node after this podcast with just downloading an app. So I think like that was one of the considerations of like making sure that the barrier of entry for someone to participate and facilitate the network is going to be a lot lower. If you just have a GPU card, even if you don't have access to purchasing iron, you can still participate in mining iron. I think that's very important. And so I think for all these reasons, we chose proof of work. The other kind of reason is, especially when we started, there was this misconception that proof of stake equals faster block times, which is not true. One clear example is, Ethereum had the exact same block time pre-merge and post-merge. There are many proof of stake chains that have much slower block times than, let's say, some other proof of work times. Like Tezos, for instance, I believe is either 1 or 3 minutes. Mina, I believe, is 3 minutes. So there's like this, Ethereum proof of work is 15 seconds. And so like, okay, well, that was a wrong kind of assumption that proof of stake leads to faster block times. And then, the other one was security vulnerabilities. We have been working with proof of work as an industry for more than 10 years now. Obviously, proof of work has its challenges, but we know all of the bugs that are associated with it. For proof of stake, when we talk about proof of stake, it's actually a family of algorithms. The way Cosmos proof of stake versus Ethereum versus Tezos versus Mina versus, I don't know, name your other project. They all have a different way of doing proof of stake. And so it's kind of a uncharted grounds in terms of security vulnerabilities, in my opinion. And this isn't to say that there's security vulnerabilities in the protocol itself, but that we haven't really explored like the social, I don't want to say social hacks, but to some degree that of like social collusion and how that affects the protocol. Versus for proof of work, again, it's kind of like, it's towards the side of more chaos, more anarchy, which I think does lead to better decentralization results. And then the fourth reason, which I think is kind of what you were alluding to, is for proof of stake coins. I mean, typically the coin has voting and staking, and so it is, and yield that is generated from the staking, and so it is looking at a little bit more like a security than a proof of work, where the utility of the coin is very clear. It's only for transaction fees and only for miner rewards, with no other governance or no other like yield kind of functionality. So I think proof of work at this moment in time, it does feel like the safer choice in terms of regulatory concern.
Thank you. I got to shift gears now because you said two words together that got my attention. You said social collusion. And I think of social media. When you say that, I think of social media. And right now, this past week, there's been there was a launch by Instagram called Threads, which is a competitor to Twitter. And a lot of people were jumping up and down saying they would love the idea of, Threads. And I'm like, that's still Web 2, that's not Web 3. And there are privacy benefits to Web 3 of people, not handing over their data to Facebook or to Twitter, right? What are the privacy benefits of Web 3? And what do we need to do to be able to mitigate our privacy concerns from popular Web 2 platforms to embrace Web 3?
Yeah, great question. So this is exactly why we're building Ironfish. So it's going to be a bit of a preamble, but in Web 2, whenever Web 2 breaks its promise of privacy, we have catastrophic events. So we have data leaks, we have doxing, we have harassment, we have identity fraud. So for Web 2 actually tries to retain your privacy to some extent. And like you said, like your data does get used by Facebook and whatnot, but we have this like pretty basic expectation of privacy. For instance, if you use your one of your banks, even if you use Venmo in private, you have this expectation that data is not revealed to the world. And when that does get broken, like I said, we have catastrophic events. And so here's like some examples. There's an app called Strava, which I use for running. It's an app that a lot of athletes use to track their runs. They had this pretty massive data leak at some point that revealed the location of army bases, because soldiers would go and use Strava on their daily runs and would reveal location of army bases, across the world, that were supposed to be secret. There are many other situations of like data leaks where victims would be doxxed and their addresses would be revealed to the world. Gamergate was a pretty terrible example of that to some extent. So again, when Web 2 breaks its promise of privacy, we have catastrophic events. Okay, but for Web 3, we have no privacy. There's not even a possibility of a data leak because everything is out in the open. Everything you do for Web 3 currently, with a few exceptions of the privacy protocols that we mentioned, everything is out in the open. So if you use, Ethereum, you can go on Etherscan, you can look at your wallet, you can see all the transactions, but everyone else can too. So everyone can see what exchange you've used, what NFT NFTs you might hold. So based on your exchanges, I might know who you are. Based on your NFTs, I might know your wealth. I can look at some of the other wallets that you funded. Maybe you were trying to de-anonymize and you funded different wallets. There are even websites that will now link people's wallets together because, like NFT whales might want to have different wallets so that they might purchase or sell NFTs without moving the market. And even that doesn't work because their wallets are linked. And so everything you do in Web3 currently is 100% in the open. And so it's kind of I think like if Web3 is going to win, it's going to have to be Web 2++. It's going to have to be Web 2 and better. And right now it's not. It is different, but I don't think it is actually better. And one of the things that I think is tremendously worse at is privacy. For Web 2, at least we have some we have some expectations of privacy, despite all the things that you mentioned. And for Web3, there's just simply zero expectations of privacy. Everything's out in the open. Anyway, so that's why we're building Ironfish. This is exactly why we're building Ironfish, is to make sure that crypto has this missing Lego piece for privacy. And we're building Ironfish to be that.
And what would be the benefits in the Web3 of what you're building?
Yeah, so we want to let people have access to a privacy platform, even though they currently have crypto on other chains. So for instance, if you hold DAI and you want to use any other stable or a stable coin as a payments method, but you don't want the world to see every single transaction. Very soon, something we're working on, you would be able to transfer your stable coin from, let's say, Ethereum over to Ironfish. And then you would be able to transact and store it completely privately, so that the world doesn't see every single transaction that you've made. So that's definitely one use case, but we want to obviously expand to more use cases. A lot of people have expressed their desire for a private DAO. For instance, I want to be part of a DAO, but I don't want the world to know about it. Because you can kind of think of it as like, if you're affiliated with a certain thing, then you're revealing some more data about yourself that you may not necessarily want to. Private donations have definitely been a really strong use case. For instance, when there were some donations for Ukraine, a lot of people were like, wait a minute, this is saved forever, right? So if I ever need to go to Russia, for instance, in the future, the fact that I donated to Ukraine is publicly stored forever. Like that could be used against me at a future time. But this is like a very clear example, but there are other, use cases where you might donate to something that you believe in that might be controversial at the time or at a future time. And that is basically stored forever. The other use case is private NFTs. NFTs right now are being used for many different things. They're used to some degree for identity even, but for a lot of times just investment purposes. And if you look at some of the hacks, or I say hacks in quotes, of people losing their NFTs is because of spear phishing attacks, right? Like I might contact you on Discord and say, hey, I want to purchase your NFT. I know who you are. I found your NFT and I really want it. And I have this I construct basically an attack towards you based on some of the information that I know about your wallet. And so a lot of people now have desire of hey, I want to hold my NFTs in private. It's just for investment purposes. I don't want to have it as my Twitter PFP. I just want to store it somewhere safely. These are some of the very few use cases that we're thinking of currently, but there's a lot more too.
The NFT is a good one. Yeah, I have NFTs and I would love to have a place to store them. And so that I like that. So I want to ask a technical question before I ask about the future Web3, and because I hear this a lot. On the technical side, there are zero knowledge proofs, right? And what are the practical, what are they? And first of all, for people who don't know, and the second, what are the practical applications and benefits as the zk-KPs as we transition into Web3?
Yeah, so zero knowledge proofs are really neat. They were invented in mid-'80s by Shafi Goldwasser, Sylvia Macaulay, and oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the third person's name. Eventually Shafi did actually get the Turing Award for it, which is one of the highest awards for cryptography and mathematics. And what zero knowledge proofs are, is a tool to prove honest computation. So what I mean by that is, if I give you a program and I give you an output, I can also give you a proof that the output is correct given the program. So some examples of that, I could say, like, here's a grocery receipt. I don't have to show you the individual items. I can just prove to you that you owe this amount. And I can give you zero knowledge proof that this amount is correct without you needing to redo all of the additions that went into that amount. That's one example of a zero knowledge proof, or how it can be applied. The way we are using zero knowledge proofs is we say a transaction is fully encrypted, so you don't get to see the prover, the sender, or the amount. But even though it's encrypted, I can give you the zero knowledge proof that says it has been computed correctly, such that I am not spending the funds that I do not have. AKA, I am spending the funds that I have, even though you don't get to see any of that information. Right now, zero knowledge proofs are also being used for scalability for a similar purpose. So for instance, I can say, 100 transactions have happened, like you and I maybe transacted 100 times. And at the end of those 100 transactions, this is the final state. At the end of the 100 transactions, I have 2 coins, you have 3 coins, and that's the final state. And I can say that's the final output. And you don't need to redo all the 100 transactions to get to that result. I can give you a zero knowledge proof that says this is the final state given this computation. So right now, so that's how it can be used for scalability. You can just kind of summarize effectively a ton of things that have happened and say this is the end result, and you don't need to redo that yourself. Hopefully that kind of explains a little bit about what zero knowledge proofs are.
It does. Because it does. Thank you. And I have another question. I've noticed them recently, during the bear market, like during a bull market, everybody's happy, everybody's excited, everybody's like, yeah, let's go. And then in the bear market, what I noticed was that people are from one particular blockchain or another blockchain are arguing that their blockchain is better and that it's not, and there's a little toxicity, and that's on Twitter. But I'm going to say, I believe, and I'll find out your view, because you say you're not blockchain specific, your platform. The future of Web3, I believe, is a collaborative multi-chain future. What do you think? Is that true or false, and why?
I mean, I'm definitely biased to say yes. Like, we are building Ironfish as a layer 1, and our strategy is to connect to other chains via bridges, to basically be the privacy Lego piece for crypto, which is kind of a multi-chain future, because you're saying now that there are many different chains and they have to talk together. And I think like what people don't realize is that a lot of layer 2s are looking a lot like layer 1s. So I don't know how technical your audience is here, but if you're familiar with like Optimism, Arbitrum, or pretty much any other layer 2 solution, or Aztec, even, they're trying to build their own or rebuilding their own. If you think about what a layer 2 is, it has its own block producer, it has its own blocks, it has its own consensus mechanism for how those blocks are accepted and how transactions are validated. And there's a bridge between the layer 2 and the layer 1, very similar to basically the bridge that we're going to be building between Ironfish and other chains. So I think people don't realize just how, what's the right word, how blurred the lines are between what a definition of a blockchain is at this point, and how interconnected the systems already are, and all the work that I'm seeing being put into connecting those chains even further.
I have a follow-up there. You said blur. And that's in that spot where, I'm not talking about the blur chain, but in that space where there is a blur, there've been a lot of hacks, right? There's been a lot. That's where most of the hacks this year have been, in that bridge, right? How do you think we prevent that or stop that, or would the privacy layer help, make that, unblur that, and make it so that those hacks don't occur?
Yeah, so bridges are pretty, are hard to make. But I also want to point out all the bridges that have not been hacked. Like, we have not heard of any bridge being hacked between the layer 1 and layer 2, even though every single layer 1, layer 2 has a bridge. We have not heard of any hacks on the Rainbow Bridge, which is the near to Ethereum bridge, even though there have been several attempts. Cosmos IBC, or like the Cosmos ecosystem, is all about bridges. Their entire thesis is that there's like a chain per app effectively, and all of them are connected with bridges. That's the whole Cosmos IBC system. From what I can tell, none of those have been hacked yet, or at least, hopefully I'm not wrong in saying this. So let's look at the hacks that we have occurred. So one of the, more recent ones, or the biggest one obviously, is the Ronin Bridge hack. It was like, depending on the price of ETH at the time, was 600 mil to $1 billion. It was a fairly sizable hack. And that bridge was a multi-sig bridge, meaning that there were 9 validators, and the majority of the validators have to approve a transaction. So let me just back up a tiny bit. What is a bridge and how does a bridge work? Typically, a bridge works in 3 steps. One is a user on the origin chain freezes their assets. Step 2 is that the bridge operator observes this action and validates that action. So this is where all the hacks happen. And the third step is the bridge mints a wrapped asset on the destination chain. So these are the 3 steps. And the first step of like the bridge operator looking at the origin chain and saying, hey, this transaction did happen, the person did freeze their assets on the origin chain, that's where all the hacks happen. So it's really hard to do that generically and programmatically, for instance, and that's why we have like centralized bridges or federated bridges or multi-sigs, meaning that there's a custom software, whatnot, that would observe that action. So the Ronin Bridge had this multi-sig thing, which means that 5 out of the 9 validators had to sign off on it. And that attack was like, quite masterful. It was done by the Lazarus group, and one of the hackers applied for a job at the company and actually went through multiple rounds of interviews because he wanted an engineer on their work laptop to open the resume that was a PDF file. And so he had to go through multiple rounds of interviews until finally some engineer opened the PDF on their computer. And what happened was the engineers stored the keys to the validators on their work machines. And so the exploit was able to get to those validators. And the way that bridge worked was that there were 9 validators. The company had access to 4 validators, which is not majority. But the 5th validator, which was not controlled by them, basically would auto vote the same way as the company did, for like ease of, so it's easier to kind of operate that way. And so the hacker was able to basically get majority of the votes. And so the bridge basically said, oh, users trying to unlock all these funds to this address. So that's that second step of the bridge actually observing an action in order to unlock or lock funds. So they were able to get the bridge to unlock funds to their address, basically. So to kind of back up of like, does that mean multi-sig bridges are bad because we have seen a multi-sig bridge being hacked? Well, you can point to saying like, well, they had terrible OPSEC, or maybe 9 validators wasn't enough, or maybe the way they had it structured wasn't good. Because if we look at most bridges today, almost all of them are multi-sig bridges, which it means that they're using the same exact design. But we've learned, we're like, okay, well, the idea is good. It's just like how that bridge was deployed and the execution of it maybe wasn't as good. And so we are learning. Again, I think the future is multi-chain. I think we've moved past the pains of having these bridges being hacked, and we kind of learn as an industry. A lot of bridges are not even multi-sig, they're like single signers, right? Like a lot of the layer 2 to layer 1 bridges have just one entity signing those transactions back and forth, which I think is even scarier. And that is, at this moment in time working. I guess what I'm trying to say is some of the hacks have happened not because the bridge design is bad, but it's because of the entire construction of it, and the same designs are being used today quite successfully.
Excellent. Thank you. I have actually one last question. You said it before, you said running, right? So you're an athlete, right? And so the running, I walk my dog every day for 4 miles. And she wants to go soon, but I get a lot of clarity when I do that. What benefits do you get, that you bring to this space as an entrepreneur, as a founder, as a leader, by being an athlete?
Oh gosh. I haven't done like a serious run in a while, but when I would run, I mean, it kind of like does a restart, right? Like you're so tired, you can't think. And then you get back and you have that like you take the shower, a cup of coffee, and you're like, it feels like your brain is restarting, right? Because like, um, otherwise you always think you're like obsessive about a problem that you might be having, or a problem at work or company building or the product itself, and your brain kind of goes into this loop of not being able to like step back for a moment and reapproach this problem from a different angle. And yeah, like especially if you have like a really good workout, you're so tired that your brain just shuts off for that 30 minutes or whatever, and then you get to come back and be a different person.
Thank you. So I want to thank you very much for your time today. This has been a wonderful conversation. I enjoyed speaking with you and I learned a lot. So I have one final question. That's probably the easiest one. It's how can people find out more information about you, about Ironfish, and run a node for themselves? How can they do that?
Yeah, so go to our website, ironfish.network, and you'll find all the information there. If you want to talk to me or us, the IF Labs, the foundation, I highly encourage you to visit our Discord. It's discord.ironfish.network is the short link to get there. We're also on Twitter, so Ironfish Crypto is a Twitter handle name, and my Twitter handle name is Leading the Bean. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you. Awesome.